We are on.
We're on. Welcome to Tribe Talks for this week. I was just going to say, Steph, you got something in front of you. Sorry, we're a couple minutes late. We were just having an awesome chat with one of our Connect members. She's an awesome human. I'm really excited to have talked with her. So today we're going to talk about inclusion. And I find this topic fascinating. And Steph and I were just talking before, like earlier today, and it is like a minefield. Hey, Kaz, thanks for jumping on. Let us know if you're there, guys. Thanks for commenting, Kaz. So we'd love today to actually be a little bit of an interactive call. So please, comment, because we want to get your insight into inclusion. So I'll give you a bit of background. I've just started a graduate certificate in specialist inclusive education. And two of the subjects that I'm doing, one is social justice and one is teaching and learning in the inclusive classroom. And this topic of inclusion keeps coming up. And I've got to tell you, for the past 2 weeks, I've actually found myself really angry, reading and shouting, and my husband's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe that these people don't understand what families are going through, because some of the ways they describe inclusion, I cannot see working for my child. And I had to get clear in my head what they actually meant. So I've been emailing people. I'm like, what do you mean when you say this? And I'm trying to explain my situation and my view of what I thought inclusion was. But what I've realized is that inclusion actually means 100 different things to 100 people. And it's a very, everyone has their own interpretation. And I'm really interested to see what our families think the word inclusion means. Because Steph even said her version of inclusion would look different to my version of inclusion.
Yes. And since we spoke just before, half an hour ago, my mind's been ticking about I'm actually questioning my own thoughts on it as well. And what do I want for her? What does an inclusive life look like for Charlie, for our family? It's really, really interesting. We really want to hear from you about what that means. I think we had, for those of you who saw my post this week, I had so many people reach out about, her IQ testing, and going in there, I was quite defensive because I was like, why should these kids have to be IQ tested, to be benchmarked, to fit a criteria, to then go to school and all this stuff? I was quite fired up and defensive. And once I was in there, I realized that, this is actually going to help me get a better understanding of where she excels, what she struggles with, and also helps give us that piece of paper that we can take to the school to help her fit in the box that she needs to fit into, right? I hate it, but it is life as well. And I think there's a point, I don't think it's ever going to get easier. I'm always going to feel that pull, but it's then how do I advocate to get her to fit? How do I advocate to get her the support she needs? And that's where we're at. But what if we didn't need to push so hard for our kids to fit? And how will that look now? And how will that look when she's a teenager? How will that look when she's an adult in a workplace? That might be ever changing. So there's so much in that.
So Amanda's just said inclusion to her is everyone treated equally. Everyone's needs are met regardless of what they are. So some of the stuff they've been asking us to engage with in the uni course is so you've got, I'll try and describe it and hopefully you can see it. So you've got equity and equality. Equity and equality, which actually mean two different things. So equality is okay, we're trying to look over a fence to watch a baseball game, and everyone gets a box to stand on. So because you can't see over the fence, so everyone gets a box, but you've got a tall guy, a medium-sized guy, and a short guy. So have you seen that picture?
Yes.
Yeah, right. So that's being equal, right? But then equity is, the tall guy actually doesn't need the box to see over the fence, right? Then you've got the medium guy having one box and then the little guy having two boxes, then they can all see over the fence. But they've all got different things. But then there's another picture where they just take the fence down and everybody can see without needing the prompt. And I'm just like, how do we bring that into everyday life? Like, how does that happen? And a lot of the stuff that I'm reading about is quite political. And this is the part that I find fascinating, is that these political views of what education is supposed to be, of what society is supposed to look like, they're all taught through school. So the government of the day decides on the education policy to teach the things that they want the society to learn so it can keep doing what it does, right? But if we keep having people with disabilities or people who are different separated, then we as a society learn that they're always different. And I was saying to Steph before we jumped on that the language that is often used around people who have disabilities, even the word disability, means that people have a deficit, that it's less than what's normal, right? And I was like, I never actually thought about it like that. And like, we will talk about, lacking abilities in, or like all the language around it is all about a deficit. So then this article that I read yesterday, I'll try and find the quote. It actually made me cry yesterday. Basically, all that language subconsciously leads people to believe that people who have disabilities, who are different, are less than or aren't as human as. And I was just like, that actually like hit my heart, to think that my daughter is going to have to deal with this underlying thing. It's not overt. People don't deliberately do it, but that is how our system is designed. And I was just like, the whole system needs to change. It's not just about inclusion. It's about like teaching society to be better humans, and not.
Yeah, it's not about, and I think we mentioned this before, it's not even, it is very much about our kids, right? It's obviously the base of it, but it's also about like, the rest of society as well, like to being able to learn from our children and learn their abilities as well, not just that disability, like to learn how to interact and to support. And this is part of why we do tribe talks. But like, I was watching Charlie yesterday as she was answering the questions. Watch this woman, like this woman would be checking off her page, like marking her criteria, and Charlie would look over to see if like she knew she was being marked, like benchmarked. And I think it's the first time I was like, oh, you definitely know that you are being watched. Like, and I know it has to happen, but I know that this is the first of many tests. And like, how do I wholeheartedly say, it's fine, go into school, enjoy yourself, it's going to be great, when I don't even know that that's going to be an environment that's going to support the needs that she has. And it should be a right for all of our children in whatever learning environment they have to be able to have that. It's quite scary. So
I was just saying to Steph before we got on, because Charlie had the IQ test yesterday, it's mentioned in a couple of the articles that like the whole concept of an IQ test is to categorize and to predict the capacity of a human. So what they are capable or not capable of based on a measure of their intelligence, which to me just seems like a ridiculous concept, because how can someone tell all the capacity of a human being through one test that only measures one type of intelligence? But this is how our society works.
Especially neurodiverse minds, which is just like, they're different. Like, and the other part, like since we just spoke, is I actually am really proud of her abilities. Like, yes, she finds other things really difficult, but I watched her yesterday in awe, going, oh my God, this is my child. Like, she's amazing. And like, what if we could look at it that way? I know it sounds magical and fluffy, but like, what if it was just different?
Different abilities.
Different abilities. Like, and she was supported that way. I'm actually really proud of her autism. But what if that was something that like we could then advocate in schools so that teachers could learn just different ways that they could help her. Like it wasn't like a big scare, oh, the kid with autism. Like she was able to be included and people ask questions and have the conversations. Like, why can't that happen? Why isn't it happening more?
And this is the thing with education, is that it's now based on productivity. So, and this is where the politics come into it. And I was explaining this to Steph before, in that a lot of the Western countries' governments are sort of influenced by something that's called like a neoliberal view of politics, which is all about the economy and productivity, and that's how our education system is swayed to produce people who can contribute to society and the economy and be productive. So if that's how education is swayed, there's and the curriculum is written all around that. Hey, Christine. Hey, Trude. The curriculums are written about creating these productive humans. Where's the space for creating compassionate humans with skills in relationships? Because that's actually not. There's no time to teach that. This is where I find the rub as an educator and as a parent. It doesn't fit together. And I emailed one of the chairs of one of the topics that I'm doing about. I just couldn't get my head around. Okay, so they want me to talk about how this classroom's going to work, where it includes everyone. So I'm talking people with disabilities, people with different ethnicities, people who are gifted, people like students from all walks of life, where they all have their needs met, where they all are learning and expanding, and no one is singled out as being different. And I was like, I just can't get my head around, I'm molding it, and I'm like trying to move things. I'll show you the thing on my wall behind me. Okay, so they've got this like concept map. That took me half a day and I'm still not happy with it. And it's got all these different moving parts and I still don't think it's going to work. And I said to him, like, what do you mean by it? Like, it's just such a fuzzy concept. And I think the reason why I can't see it working is because our education system focuses on data and standardized tests, and teachers are under the pump to get through a curriculum and teach certain topics. But those core human factors that, like, there's a quote in one of these that says education should be an apprenticeship in relating to other humans.
Yes.
Like if education was an apprenticeship in relating to other humans, then we could have a fully inclusive classroom, because it would be about teaching people how to interact. And I actually think we could teach a lot of concepts through that, but that's not the way our education system is structured right now.
No. So how do we change it? What's the magic answer, Sandy Golder?
I don't know, but I got my fired up pants on today. It just makes me mad, because I just said to Steph, I can't see that happening in Imogen's lifetime. She's 9, can't see it happening. Judy says we should rename it Diffabilities.
I love that.
I like that. Michelle says different, not less, is what my 12-year-old daughter proudly talks about with others. I love that. Trude felt left out when she was growing up with her disability. And this is insightful. Like, how do you feel now, Trude, as an adult in the community? Do you feel inclusion? Like, do you feel you're included in your community? Do you feel like understood, or do you still feel on the outer? Christine says, my son's school has a psychology department which has really changed the way the school functions and includes diversity. And do you know what, Christine? I think that's important to point out. There are some schools doing it really well. And Steph was explaining one near her that your dad works at.
Yeah. So they've got, their quite prestigious school, right? So then they've got the funds to do it. So that always helps. But they've basically got a SEEP department. So that supports the kids one-on-one with carers in all areas that they need. And if some of the kids are more high functioning, they're then immersed into the mainstream classrooms where possible. And there's just like they're tailored. Their learning is tailored. And then separate to that, they're part of the school community. So they're part of like assemblies, like the other neurotypical kids know them, know how to interact. They sit with them, like they're part of the community, but yet their learning is supported as well. Right. So, and as part of that, there's an ethos of inclusion because it's diverse minds everywhere. We need more of that. Like that for me, like if I could have that for Charlie and that was standard for her, that would be a dream for me. And like I know that the whole ideal thing of inclusion is, well, that no one's different, but as it stands today, she is different. And I'm kind of okay with that. I also need her learning supported, but I want her to be part of a community. And I know many parents as well feel the same. So how do we find that balance, I suppose, is the magical thing? Or how do we replicate that model into every school?
Yeah. So the concept of inclusion that uni are trying to teach us is that, as I said before, like everyone is included and no one stands out as being different. And I was saying to Steph before, I don't think that's actually possible in our current education system. But what Riverview's doing, I think sounds like the closest thing that would work, right? But if you look from the perspective they're trying to teach us, if you have a support person in there with them, then they stand out. But some kids need one-to-one support so they can access communication or understand the concepts.
And also, what if there was that element of, okay, yep, they stand out because they've got a support person, but what if that was normalized? Like, what if it wasn't so like, oh, that person's got a support person, oh, like, and it was just like, oh, that person needs a little bit of support, all good. Like, hey, mate, it's not that big, scare factor. We need to remove that the weirdness around disability.
I think so. And I think this is the whole concept with inclusion, is that it makes diversity normal. Like it's just what the world's like, which in reality it is, because it's like 20-something%, or I can't actually remember it's around 20-something% of the population have some sort of disability or like something different, right? So that's a big chunk of society. So why do we still have people in the community looking strangely at a child with a disability? Amanda just said she grew up without a mum at everything because wheelchair access and support workers wasn't really a thing, right? Times have fortunately changed a little since then, but you know what? There's still a lot of places that people in wheelchairs can't access. It's such an interesting topic.
There's so much to it, and we're never going to be able to cover it all in a 30-minute tribe talk. I'd love to, but just to hear your opinions, mums and dads, carers out there, about your experiences is everything, because we want to learn from you as well. So
Christine says, my son has gone from his previous school having a TA to keep him safe and hating autism to being proud of having autism and the abilities it gives him, which is ideal. This is how we want kids to feel. And she says her son's school is public mainstream. He is included. When there are challenges, all the kids are educated, not just having him removed.
Boom.
Which is, yes. The thing I think, though, Christine, is that that's done in a really elegant way with support. And I know we had feedback from a couple of our mums when I just did a post in our Connect page about the difference between New South Wales and Queensland schools, because I was reading about the policies, and the policies are very different between the Queensland Education Department and New South Wales Education Department. And a lot of the schools in Queensland, it's not all of them from what we've read, but have removed support units and then incorporated students with disabilities into mainstream classes. Some of them have done very well. Many of them feel like, some of the quotes were, I feel like we're in hell. I've removed my child from the schooling system and homeschool now because of they've just been dumped in there. So I think it can be done, but it has to be done very well. Otherwise, it's very polarizing.
And it would be wonderful if it was done the same way across the country and then ideally globally. I don't know if that's like a far off dream, but you know, I don't think it's asking too much. I really don't. I don't think this is, you know, we put, and especially the government put so much funding. Don't want to come across ungrateful because NDIS is awesome, but you put so much funding into crap. Like, could we put more support behind making this possible in classrooms or making it possible in society so that people have the support they need to learn inclusively? Like, my voice is all squeaky because I'm fired up.
Do you know what, though? I think even so I was teaching this week, and on Tuesday I had a class that had a teacher's aide come in because a couple of the kids in that class must have had funding. And she offered one of them headphones so they could have the questions that they were working on the computer to be audio, like to be read to them through they have like a function. And he refused, this kid refused. And I was standing right near them, and to the right of me, like he was here, and to the right of me, one of the kids said, "Oh, why does he get headphones?" And the kid next to him goes, "Because he's SPED, like special ed." And like then I heard them giggle, and like I pulled them up on it straight away. But this is the thing, because this is not normal in every classroom, they're stigmatized because of it. So and then those little humans grow up to be big humans in the world and go shopping and see someone wearing earmuffs like Emmy and go, "Oh, they're SPED," or they're, you know, and make a judgment about their capabilities because they're not exposed to it.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's tricky, but it definitely needs to change. Hey, Louisa. Judy says all schools should be like that, Steph. I'm desperate to find a high school that will do all of that for Ebony come next year. She's so stressed about it.
Well, I'll be learning from you in a few years. We're heading into primary school next year, so yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm sure I'll have lots of questions for you, mamas.
Christine says that she's so grateful for his current school. His previous New Zealand school just didn't have the funding or capacity to support him. Shana says, we're thankful our son is in a mainstream school with a support worker 5 days a week, all day. That's so awesome. And I think for many kids, that's a great option. It's a fantastic option. I was saying I can't imagine that for Imogen at this stage. She's at a special school and she's got quite high needs. And she's currently in a class of 4 with 3 or 4 staff. And she still has days where she can't cope. So I don't think in her case that would be right yet. But that's not to say in 2 years that her skills won't be at a place where that might be the right option for her to be in a mainstream room with a full-time aide. Who knows? We can't limit capacity like that. And that's why IQ and stuff like that is a bit, I know we need it to get the support, but it's,
I know. It really weirded me out this week. I was like, oh, we're doing this. We're doing an IQ test for my 4-year-old. Okay. Yep. And this feels odd. And it's just been ticking on my mind all week. But
this topic's hitting a nerve for Trude. She's feeling a bit emotional. Big hugs, Trude.
Important conversations, Trude, right?
Yeah. Lara Peterson says, my son's in a support unit in high school. The mainstream kids always refer to the kids as SPEDs. I was furious when I heard this. Lara, I was having this conversation at school yesterday. No, sorry, what day is it today? Friday, on Wednesday. I don't even know what day it is anymore. With one of the teachers, because I told her what had happened in that class the previous day. And she said, well, you know, like 20 years ago, she was an SLSO. 20 years ago, everyone called special education SPED. That was just the abbreviation for it. There was no negative connotation to the word. It was just an abbreviation. I went, that is really interesting. And she said it's a bit like the spastic center that then changed its name, and like that word's not used anymore. Like it's funny how language develops and different meanings get made to the words, because the way that student said it the other day definitely wasn't a positive use of the word, but back 20 years ago, that was just the abbreviation for special education. But it's definitely not an appropriate word. I would be furious too, Lara. Samantha says education on inclusion needs to start at preschool. Children with and without disability need to learn together how to give or ask for support. Yep. Yes. Your preschool's done it so well. That's awesome. Sorry.
I agree with that, because I was actually having a conversation with my parents about it the other day. I'm like, we need to be talking to kids about it right now. Like my girls are, 4 and 5, 5 and 6, little, right? So, and I just feel like aren't they too little to really understand like and I was like, I really don't think so. Like we don't need to go into depth into what inclusion means and get all complex about it, about society. But, I think it's a useful conversation to have about differences and anyone who's different, and I don't know.
And I was saying to Richie yesterday, like my best friend's daughter, Harriet, who's Imi's bestie, has known Imogen since Harriet was born. Imogen's a bit older. And she is like the epitome of inclusion. She includes Imi in whatever she can. She doesn't look like, she knows Imi has different needs and she understands that, but she doesn't look at Imi as less than. And she included Imi in her birthday party, and we didn't have to really do anything different. We were just like, I brought Imi's headphones if it was going to be too loud. I brought a weighted blanket so she had that support. But she joined in everything with the other kids. And if Harriet can learn that just from being around her, we haven't done any special inclusion course with Harry. Like she's just naturally like that because she's always been around Imi, and she knows her as a human being, not as a special education or support student at a school.
100%.
I'm just going to go through these comments.
There's lots of comments. Good.
Michelle's going to come back and watch the rest of it because she's one of the people who is homeschooling because she doesn't have a choice at the moment. Michelle's actually in a really unique situation, one of those holes in the legislation that makes me mad. Christine says it's like the connotations around the puzzle piece as a representation of autism.
Yeah.
I was reading, I'm doing effective classroom management as well, one of the subjects, and part of the reading this week was ABA therapy. ABA used as a classroom management strategy, and I was like, this actually really surprises me because every time it comes up in our page, people either love it or they hate it. And it's like very polarizing, but it's one of the main psychological studies that are done on behavior and used as strategies in behavior management. And I was like, it's so weird what you learn.
So interesting. ABA is a whole other topic, isn't it? It opens up a can of
every time. I'm not sure I want to open that can. This call is not about that.
We won't go
I don't want to open that can of worms. Samantha says, I don't think little kids grow up excluding, but when it's a taboo subject, they don't learn. I agree. I think it needs just to be normalized. Yeah.
My Imi was asking yesterday. She's been saying it quite a bit lately. She was pretending like she's in the garage on her bike, and she was like, Mom, imagine if I was in a wheelchair. And I was like, why? Where's that coming from? And she's been bringing it up, and I'm like, do you are any of your friends in a wheelchair, or do you have any friends with disabilities at your school? And she was like, I don't really know. And then she was like, Charlie has autism, doesn't she? And I'm like, yep, she has autism. And she was like, and Big Imi, so you're Imi. I'm like, yep, she has autism. And she was like, oh, okay. And she's like, are they in wheelchairs? I'm like, no, they're not in wheelchairs. So we had a big discussion around. She was like, okay, cool.
It's normal.
Conversation, right?
Oh, God, these kids could change the world.
They can.
If we teach them all to be like that. Trude says she talks to her kids about it all the time. And I do think it's a very important conversation we can all have. Judy says Ebony's been accepted into the support class at the local high school, but she's very reluctant to put her there as she will be targeted and picked on by the mainstream. Teenagers are cruel. You know what, Judy? Teenagers are cruel regardless, unfortunately, I've found. And, you know, sometimes segregating is hard, but depending on what her needs are, maybe academically at the moment that will best serve her, but it might be also worth looking into. There is funding for integrating students into mainstream classrooms that I read about this week. So, and the school can apply for that, for her to have someone to help her in a mainstream class if you prefer that. So maybe that might be something to look into. Christine says, we don't let our son use autism as an excuse for having a challenge. We tell him that everyone has challenges. Otherwise, thinking he only has challenges because of autism, he is excluding himself. That's a really great viewpoint, Christine.
That is amazing. Tanya brought that up the other week because she's got, you know, a son who's high functioning. And she was like, he always tries to get away with it. He'd be like, oh, Mum, it's just my autism. And she's like, no.
Pulls him up.
Exactly. So, yeah, we have to walk that road carefully.
Yeah. Trude says Cooper's in mainstream. And he has a helper in his class and they don't care about it. So the kids don't care about it. And I think if it's just a normal thing.
Exactly.
At the school. Tracy's just joined, but we'll rewatch. She says, but my daughter was only just saying last night how mainstream kids say they are dumb because they are in the unit class. It opened a discussion how we can make the school more aware of autism and how they can actually learn from them. And this is it, Tracy. I think it has to come from the school, and if it's not, that's where we as parents need to advocate.
Yeah.
Which is a whole new kettle of fish, and part of the reason I'm doing a graduate certificate at uni
really
when I've got 1,000 balls in the air. Let's just add another ball to the juggling.
Oh my God, you're crazy.
But when you know this stuff, when you can like link it and go, well, why isn't this happening? Or I know in that legislation it says this, it gives us more legs to stand on, I think.
I think knowledge is power, and if we can go into our education systems or our schools, our local schools, and be able to say, actually, I heard about this or this, you know, you never know what response you might get. Not all schools are perfect. You definitely have schools who aren't doing it well. But what if it was just an opportunity to ask to have a conversation and it opened up a whole new world for your child? Like
even just like something simple, starting with asking for your school's disability or inclusion policy. Because I found that many schools don't actually even have them, which is like light bulb in itself.
Yeah,
concerning. But you know, but unless we say that it matters, they won't look at it. So like we have to actually be vocal. The head teacher of the support unit at the school actually said it has to come from the parents. Like if the parents speak up, then stuff gets done.
Yeah. I've got a friend who's an OT on the Central Coast, and she was talking about some schools up there. And she was like, at the end of the day, I can give you all the advice on the schools that I work in and which one's better and all the stuff. And she was like, but at the end of the day, it's really comes down to the ethos of the school, the principal. It comes down to you advocating and your advocacy, getting behind your child and asking for what you need and pushing for it. It's unfortunate we have to fight so hard, but maybe
it sucks. Let's face it. Yeah, it sucks that we have to do that, but that's our role as a parent. Really.
But maybe that's us getting the wheels of change in motion. Like if we all have this fire in our bellies and the strength to do it, like maybe that could be the start.
Numbers.
Really awesome.
Numbers, baby. And it's not even just for kids with disabilities. Like I advocated for Cooper at his school because his school don't place that much emphasis on sport and he loves sport. And one day he had to choose between attending the cross-country regional carnival or his school athletics carnival. I was like, why are they on the same day? The kids who love sport have to then choose and miss out on one. Like it's actually a very long letter. I'm not going to go into everything I wrote on it, but advocacy is part of being a parent regardless. Like, it's just, there's some times that but doing it in an assertive way, not aggressive and not passive. It's like finding that middle ground where you're making a really good point. It's like, get good at debating, my friends. Samantha says, absolutely on the pushback and knowing the legislation, even if you feel like that's too hard, call someone like family advocacy who can give you the guidance. Absolutely. Christine says, that reminds me that in high school I did special class maths. It was known affectionately as cab maths, short for cabbage maths. Gosh, that's terrible. I'd forgotten. Actually, Christine, one of the articles I read yesterday was about New Zealand schooling, and cabbage come up in that as well.
Oh, interesting.
So it must have been a Kiwi term. Tracy said, I'd be interested in regards to that funding you just mentioned, as my daughter does mainstream hospitality and struggling to get support for her class without the support coming out of the unit class and leaving them short staffed for other kids in the class. So, Tracy, if you Google integration funding, it's there's a whole like policy on it. Kids in a support unit can't get integration funding. However, if she's accessing a mainstream class, she may be able to access integration funding for that class only. So it'd be worth talking to the school about. The school will apply for you. You'll fill out all the paperwork and get the supporting documents and all that sort of stuff. But I'd say if she's already in the support unit, they'd be able to help you with that, whatever you need to put in for it. Definitely worth looking at. Then the support unit don't have to fund it, and they can have another person come in and help her.
Yeah.
Christine says removing the emotion and sticking with the facts, which is sometimes very difficult, but because the emotion needs to drive us. But when we're having those conversations, we do need to be very factual, because that's where the neoliberal stuff comes in, and the economies and the productivity and all that stuff they like to focus on. So we've got to use their words to get what we need, basically.
It's so much speaking the right language in the right context.
Like the NDIS. Let's not get started on that. We're already 5 minutes over.
All right.
Thank you for joining us today, guys. That was really interesting, and we still don't know really what inclusion means. And I said to Steph, we're not going to be able to solve that problem today, because it means so many different things to so many different people. But it's a really great discussion to start having, because if you can advocate for what you want inclusion to look like for your child, then that's the start. Yes. And I think it's got to start with us, because otherwise it's not going to start.
Agree. Amen.
All right. Thanks for joining us today, guys.
Bye, guys. You're awesome.
Bye.